back. It's been 90 days of police raids, Molotov cocktails, bombs, injured police and civilians. At least 120 people have been killed and 100 seriously injured in violent face-offs between Venezuelans opposed to President Nicolas Maduro's holding of an election on Sunday aimed at overhauling the country's constitution. The election authorities of Venezuela say that there was a 41% turnout, but Western media reports have reported empty polling booths and sparse lines of voters outside them. The US is threatening sanctions. Other countries have called for President Maduro to step down. Sections of the Venezuelan media supportive of President Maduro point to the one-sidedness of foreign media coverage. Venezuela's crisis seems nowhere near an end. But what and why is something at stake for the US or other nations as far as a purely domestic election in the South American country is concerned? Senior foreign editor Padma Rao has this report.
A nation of great biodiversity strategically located at the northern tip of South America. A country of 31.7 million citizens. And since a discovery made by prospectors in the early 20th century, the home of the world's largest known oil reserves, making it a leading exporter of the precious fuel that the energy-starved world is hungry for. And in that may lie the key to Venezuela's near isolation in the global arena and the violence that has been rocking the country for the past 3 months. By the early 2000s and after the glut of the 1980s, global oil prices rose again, boosting the country's fortunes. Social spending went up too. Poverty was on the wane. But by 2010, and given the country's dependency on oil as its main income earner and a regime of controversial subsidies, poverty and inflation were on the rise again. Current President Nicolas Maduro, who came to power in 2013, faced an uphill task and responded with severe measures. But inflation spiraled out of control. In 2015, and at 100%, it was the world's highest. Crime, corruption and other economic woes brought Venezuelans out on the streets by 2014. In 2017, there seems no let-up. Last year, President Maduro declared an economic emergency and introduced a series of harsh decrees to enforce farm labor to produce food for the country, among other things. 2 years later, and even as the president consolidated more powers into his office, the Venezuelan opposition branded him a dictator. Support for the opposition swelled and is today visible on the streets and in the headlines every day. The United States is calling for sanctions, and Venezuela stands internationally isolated. But there's another side to this picture. Sections of the Venezuelan media point to two crucial aspects: that the Western media has remained silent on the more than 41% of Venezuelans who did come out to vote for the Constituent Assembly on Sunday. They also point to the nearly $55 million that the US's State Department has budgeted to support all opposition forces calling for President Maduro's ouster. But what could be Washington's motive? For an answer, consider what Iran, Iraq and Venezuela, whose presidents have been and are on the US blacklist, all have in common. For all its benefits, liquid black gold remains the stuff that makes and breaks empires and imperialists. Padma Rao, WION.
And joining us, Diego Sukira, journalist and political analyst with us from Caracas. Good evening, Diego. Thank you for joining us here. The official figures say that 8 million votes were cast. The opposition and Western press say only 2.5 million votes were cast. Is there a way to assess who is telling the truth here?
Well, good evening. Thanks for having me. Of course, there's a way to prove all these votes we casted yesterday, and you can audit them because we have one of the best electoral systems in the world, and that's Carter Center's words, not ours, not Venezuelan words. And there's a very technical, precise, and transparent way to audit all these votes. So it's more like fake news to say we're only 2 million when we saw a massive movement of people casting their vote nationwide. So it's not we're going through the same biased narratives when on one half we have the facts, the real facts on the ground, and on the other half we have the same biased stories that we've been going through since, I don't know when, since last 18 years against our government, against our own political project, and making Western powers trying to bring forth all their political agenda, and behind them, it's always the corporate interest. In this case, of course, big oil corporate interests.
And what about the violence? Of course, the Western media reports say that there were sparse lines, not many voters. The opposition-sponsored vote calling for an early election earlier this month had 7 million votes cast. This is 8 million. So if you talk about legitimacy, that should give a clearer picture. But what about the violence? How widespread is it?
Well, first of all, what happened on the past July 16th was more like a survey. They were just signing. You could have signed several times. And actually, once they did that, they burned out all the notes where the signing were. So there's no way to prove if there were actually 7 million people signing. And there's also proof of people signing several times. And besides that, that's basically an information operation that's going on. We've been going through a very multi-pronged regime change operation since 2013, once the President Maduro got elected. And that hasn't stopped since. So there's all this violence is also being funded, trained, and promoted by Western powers, by corporate media, directly by USA and NET and all these NGO financing sources.
My final question to you, Diego. The U.S. calls this vote a sham. President Maduro has said, why should I care about what Donald Trump or any of his people say? But they're also threatening oil sector sanctions. How worried is Maduro? How worried should he be?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of how worried we could be, because it's not only Maduro. The sanctions are going to punish the whole country. First of all, it's not true it's going to be only high-level government officials or anything. It's going to be the whole country, including all the opposition people. So it's not that easy, first of all. And then that's very descriptive, actually, of what could be going on. Which are the other countries that have been sanctioned recently? You have Syria, you have Iran, you have Russia, and you have North Korea. And it's quite expressive to check all these facts against what's going on. We're in the same axis, actually, and we have very good political relationship with China, with Russia, with all the multipolar proposals that are going on against the unipolar vision of U.S. corporate imperialism. That's the word that goes there. So it's not it could be worrisome for us in a way, but we can always find a way to go through them. It's not only a U.S. ruled world yet, and we are not a U.S. ruled country. And that's what Maduro's words are all about, and we support those words, by the way.
Right, Diego. Thanks very much for bringing your perspective out and sharing it with us. Thank you for joining us from Caracas.